Hey, welcome to Inside Integration. My name is Chris, and today I am joined by Chris Bruno from Vantage.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. As you said, I'm also Chris, and happy to be here. Appreciate it.
It's nice. You and I both have the same initials, the same number of letters in our names, and I mean it should be a total, total natural, natural conversation that we'll get into here. Um,
It never causes confusion, does it? Right? Like when hey CB, and we both turn our heads. Right? It's we got to go by last name only. That's the only thing that does it. We're both from back east, so that doesn't help either. Right? So yeah, yeah, it's been a challenge sometimes.
yeah, some of the email chains where it's like, yeah, CB, can you take care of this? I'm like, wow, that's way out of my depth. I need an adult here, and usually they're referring to you, so that usually works out pretty good. Um, you know, we know each other pretty well. We've been associated with Vantage, and you're our point guy, and we couldn't ask for a better one. Obviously, not to butter you up too much before we kind of get into this, but what where did you get your start, Chris? Like what led you to Vantage and the Grand, and how how did you find yourself in this custom integrator industry?
Yeah, Chris, thanks. I mean, great question. I mean, everybody's got a story, right? So, I started with Legrand back in 2010. I actually started with a sister company that was nested under Wattstopper that we brought over from Europe. It was a product line called Axolute by Bitticino. And the approach was really high voltage wiring devices that were extremely decorative that we were creating a market for here in the States. My background, because I was a good fit for this with Legrand when I was recruited, was that I owned a rep firm called Pacific Specifications for a number of years. And we had a number of different construction materials, both from the building envelope perspective and then from the foundation. Like, so for example, we had a highly engineered concrete product, which was used partially in the rebuild of the Pentagon after the September 11th attacks. And then we had things like glass mosaic from Italy, and then electrical components. And so I had a lot of background with specifiers, whether it be lighting designers or architects or engineers. And so the opportunity with Legrand came, and I was interested in pursuing it. It was at the time where the economy was definitely taking some hits in '08 and '09. And so it was that led me toward Legrand, and then from there it expanded into my role as a regional for Vantage Controls, and then of course later when we acquired Q Motion, later branded Legrand Shading, I became a regional for both those brands, so Legrand Shading and Vantage Controls.
Gotcha. And I mean, I would imagine that your history as a specifier is probably, that's probably some invaluable experience there, right? Because it seems like nowadays, at least all the integrators that we talk to are, trying to make sure that they're in that specifier market, that they're in that, sort of thing that they're interfacing. What are some good ways for custom integrators to kind of get into that specifiers mindset and get their stuff specified into a project?
Yeah, thanks. And so I will say this before I answer your question, slightly just kind of preceding it. I hear the same thing all the time from the integrator, believe it or not, the electrician and many other trades on a project, is that they want to get in earlier than they already are, right? And so I think the first approach to the specifier, because of course our job was to create a market, and we went dealer direct. We went to the integrator and we said, this is why Vantage versus others. And they said, well, that's great, but we'd love to see you on the plans. And so that led us to, okay, let's go to the lighting designer, and let's educate them on our solution versus the others that they're typically using, and point out the key differentiators of why us versus them. And then doing that led me to be able to answer your question, which is to be of service, but then also to be mindful of when to be of service, because they operate very much like an attorney. They, meaning the lighting designers, they're billing by the hour, right? And so if they're going to have a conversation about something, they're not going to do it casually without billing it to a specific project unless it counts toward like a continuing education unit, right? A CEU presentation we hear a lot. So one of the things I would suggest is that the integrator partner with, whether it's Legrand or some of the other fixture alliance companies that we're a part of, or the Keypad Alliance partners that we're a part of, take advantage of the CEUs that are accredited that we do have. And it is a way for the custom integrator to offer something of value that might not be project specific, but it is necessary for that designer in their continuing education. And so they can earn up to an hour of continuing education units for that year. And the topics are relevant, right? We have one regarding tunable white. That's something very popular these days, right? Especially when we're taking, I know we might cover this later, but people have lots of questions about, how do we take, 2 or 3 LEDs in an LED engine and create a tunable white that emulates a light, an incandescent light that we all grew up with, right? And so get away from the stark whites and go to warmer whites. So CEUs would be one way.
Well, and that's a great offering too, because with Vantage and the resources that you guys have, being such a large group, the ready-made templates and essentially the educational blueprint where you could have an integrator that takes that material and hosts a lunch and learn or something very similar where it's a great networking event. If you've got space, if you can get space and you're an integrator, you can cast a nice wide net, right? Bring out all your target builders, bring out all your target designers, and kind of package this thing as a networking event. But at the same time, as you said, it's worth their time because they're getting their CEUs to maintain their certifications and that sort of thing. And I know CEUs is an AIA or an architecture group thing. Is there an equivalent for designers? Like, is there an ASID version that you guys also?
Sure. I mean, so there's a number of different organizations. So you have, you mentioned ASID, which is for more driven by interior designers, but IALD, the International Association of Lighting Design, also requires CEUs, as does ASID and AIA. So you're really kind of hitting all the disciplines. And I think that manufacturers should be aware that the rules have loosened a little bit in terms of like you can never talk about your product. That's not as much the case anymore. It's almost like, hey, you can take 50 minutes, go over the core content. You're allowed a certain amount of time to discuss some manufacturer-specific items. So basically, you can tack your commercial onto the end of it, right? So you have to double check the regs and take all that with a grain of salt. But I think unless you're approaching the designer, the architect, or any other stakeholder on the project, unless you're approaching them with a project-specific solution that they can bill hours to, right? Then you're going to need to offer them some kind of a CEU. And I will say this, like the intangible value of getting all the people in the room is getting all the people in the room and the conversations that we've seen grow from there. And I had one dealer remark to me that, wow, maybe I will get business out of that room. And it was my suggestion that this person attend, one of our events. I suggested that he look at it in a certain light, and he did. And luckily, I was right. He was skeptical. He came because I asked him to, and he said, "Well, I think I found business in the room."
I think that's great. It's definitely, again, from a former integrator, it's encouraging that you guys provide these things, but it is absolutely, from an integrator standpoint, it's kind of terrifying to try and figure out how to expand your business. And a lot of folks, they really just expand via word of mouth and satisfied clients and referrals and that sort of thing. And we all kind of need to be looking out here for what else we could do. If your integration firm wants to offer lighting and wants to offer shading and that sort of thing, these are the contacts that you need to make, right? Because it's not, it's not the first thing people think of when they think custom integration, that, hey, this guy can do my lighting, this guy can do a lighting design, this guy, this is your technology concierge, right? Like, and I kind of feel like it's important that we all start kind of billing ourselves as that. Just the same way as we'll do your network and we'll do, we'll do the AV in your house and that kind of thing. Lighting and shades are really, really, becoming preeminent in that case. And for integrators, it's scary. It's not our natural, this is not our natural environment to go in and speak about lighting, but it sounds like Vantage and some of the initiatives, the Keypad Alliance, the Fixture Alliance, that sort of thing, to bring all these things underneath one umbrella and sort of make it easy where you're kind of taking the risk out of if you specify a Vantage control system and you use these lighting partners and these keypad partners, this thing's going to work. And that kind of confidence, for an integrator to have, to be able to take that knowledge and then speak to everybody on that project team and all the project partners is great. I mean, it's really invaluable. And we're glad you're doing that. Is that essentially, was that kind of the idea behind the Fixture and the Keypad Alliance, was to build that in? Or
Yeah, no, exactly right, Chris. I mean, like, while other solutions out there are finding ways to be, closed off and sticky and to live in a kind of a walled garden and maybe predictable ecosystem, there might be some advantages to that, but it takes away the freedom of design, whether that design comes from the interior designer starting with the specified keypad or with the fixture type, or anything in between, right? So we've always been a neutral lighting platform to build many things off of. And so if you look at what we're compatible with in terms of a control solution, right? Control 4, the company formerly known as Elan, right? Which is nice. Simple windows for Crestron or Crestron Home. We're RTI. I mean, you name it, right? We have an integration for that. So there's a great integration story there. We want to take a best-in-class approach versus hey, we're going to occupy all the classes approach, whether that's good for the project or not. And so that led us to looking at our Fixture Alliance possibilities and creating a partnership with a number of different companies that were sought after, revered, and used most often by designers. Embracing those companies, understanding those fixtures, how they work with Vantage controls. Basically, how do we control that artificial light so you can receive the effects that you're looking for, whether that's fractional dimming, which is dimming anything below 1%, all the way up to 100%, and of course every step in between. And we found that to be very valuable when working with the designers, because as you said, people are looking for a predictable result, but that's more than just the integrator. It's all the stakeholders, right? Like, this has got to work. It's got to be easy to use. It's got to be easy to order. Your lead times need to be reasonable, right? All of those things count. And so all the work that we've been doing under the hood, so to speak, with our software, but also with the partnerships and the testing as a result, really equal this result that we've been really looking for, which is to work in harmony with a number of these manufacturers, including the keypad side. We've never done that before. We manufacture keypads. We're proud of our keypads, but we realize that we don't have a style or an aesthetic for everyone. And so that, for example, we reached out to partners like Null Jack and Black Nova, Forbes and Lomax and so on, and others, right? That we made certain that there was a way for their products to work with our solution when they just had that look that the end user or designer had to have.
If there's anything that really scratches an integrator's itch, it is compatibility across. Nobody really likes. You sort of put up with some of it for some control systems if they're that central to a project and that kind of thing, but when you can come out and say, hey, we will work with anybody. You can use our keypads, which are absolutely beautiful. You can use our interfaces, which you guys are, I think, the only lighting company that has an in-wall touch panel, and it looks beautiful. Keypad designs and that kind of thing. But then when you can come out and say, oh yeah, and by the way, we are almost completely plug and play with Basalt, Black Nova, Meljack, Fords and Lomax, anything that your interior designers or architects or project stakeholders want to use. That's huge, and that really goes a long way to making the integrator look like a complete hero. Like, hey, this is what I want to put in. You can design with your own style and put your mark on this thing, and I'm just here to make sure that it's all going to work and the client's going to be happy. And that's a huge thing. And I mean, that's just on the interface side, where, the lighting side, it's, when I used to specify lighting jobs, we would typically interface with a lighting designer, and that lighting designer has no interest in dealing with anybody on the CI side for the most part, right? Like they're great at what they do their thing. But they typically work within a palette of things that they're familiar with, so they're used to DMF, or they're used to, these different lighting manufacturers. So that's what they end up specifying in every project. And by you guys doing this, it really does open up, a big world, so that you don't have to make them tap dance to figure out what the solution that's going to work best with their control system is. And that's just absolutely massive. The interoperability is just such a key thing. And we love it. And we love the approach that you've taken too, is that, everybody loves it when stuff works together. That's what we're all here for. It makes everybody's life easy. So
absolutely.
And when you're specifying lighting, being able to control it, to know that this dimming value is going to be consistent across all is huge. And not everybody does that, believe it or not. There's a pretty big contingent of folks who are, if you don't play with me, then okay, I'm going to take my ball and go home, and I'm not going to be bothered. And that is not you guys. So kudos. We
appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
That's just based on the feedback that we've heard as we're out there presenting. And what's great too is that you guys are really making it known that this is your philosophy, right? So it's out there. Hey, we're the interoperability company. And again, it kind of goes along with, Vantage. Like it's got a reputation for reliability. There's, you can, this thing will stop a truck. Like there's no question about whether things are going to work and how long they're going to work, which is exactly what you want in the lighting system. And that's hugely appealing. Typically I'm going to change gears a little bit. We were, you and I were both at an event in San Francisco last week. It was it was essentially like a lighting summit, I guess it could be called, where, you guys and we invited integrators, we invited some lighting designers, we got a bunch of people in the same room, and it was a great presentation all about how, different lights and how it's all affected and that sort of thing. But it was great to kind of get everybody together. There was a lot of great discussion in the room, and, that's pretty huge. Are there more of those coming up? Is that part of the strategy, is to kind of set these things up as we go, or?
Yeah, so I appreciate you asking that. So we, a couple of weeks ago, we had one of these done in Denver. Last week was California. And I think we have in about 3 weeks coming up in Miami, followed closely by, I believe, Dallas, and then Chicago. And some of our probably bigger markets, and certainly where you're seeing, a good population of lighting designers. And as you said, trying to get a mix of different people in the room to have a meaningful discussion.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, that was the feedback that I got from all the dealers we talked to. It was like, wow, it's great. I would never have interfaced with this person before, or, even two different AV companies that are, there's two different people who are just talking about, yeah, well, we do it this way and we do it this way. And just that kind of exchange of ideas is always great, especially with CI and lighting, right? Like the ongoing theme is that we're all sort of new in this, and we're all getting into, making sure that we're the go-to for technology, including lighting and including shades. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Legrand's shade offering, which it goes hand in hand with exactly what we're talking about. Again, we've seen it. I've been out to the training in Utah. It's it's beautiful stuff. What has been, kind of the challenge with, we all know that 800-pound gorilla in the room on the shading side. What is, what are some ways that you guys are getting more penetration into the market with with Legrand shades and how they interface with Vantage.
Yeah, I think it's a valid thought, certainly, right? And you talk a lot about comfort level, but and what I do like that I'm seeing is events like Lightapalooza, events like ours that we've had. The custom integrator understands that there's a there, and they are doing their due diligence, which I really appreciate, before just jumping in and then thinking, well, I'll just learn on the go. Those projects and those clients are too important for them to do that. And so I totally appreciate that. And they're still doing the same thing on the shade side. And so what we're trying to do to make it easier for them is, obviously, number one, it starts with awareness. And second, it starts with the training regimen. It's not complicated, but somehow things can get complicated, especially if it's not just as simple as measuring a perfectly square window, which just does not exist, right? And just teaching them that you're going to measure in more than one location. Teaching them about fabrics, right, which would traditionally be maybe a more of a designer role, and versus a technology role, but just understanding that there are several different types of fabrics out there, different openness factors, explaining what an openness factor is, explaining that a lighter shade might be better for privacy when lights are on in the inside of the project, and it's dark outside versus dark shades. And so I think really just getting them comfortable. Chris, I use the analogy often that if I take my wife's chocolate chip cookie recipe and I follow it to the letter, including baking times, I'm going to get a known, predictable, delicious result. Excuse me. But if I decide to get, really creative and add like a macadamia nut or a pecan, to the recipe, I don't have a known result anymore, and I may have baked it not enough or too much, and so I end up with a cookie that's not as intended, right? So I appreciate the integrators doing the same thing to say, okay, I have a known formula. I'm doing it this way for you, using a certain network, a certain shade company, certain shade type, certain fabric, and a certain control system. And this is the result that I get. And so now that I'm going to take a leap into fixtures, how do I do that? What are the things to look out for? In addition to that, so you asked specifically how we make it easy and tie it into Vantage. I think when it comes to the commissioning, right? So we have one piece of software called Vantage Design Center software. I can identify shades by telling the Vantage controller I've got a shade bus here. I can have it discover the shades. I can identify it by jogging a shade. Once I identify the shade, I can name it right in the Vantage software. I can set the upper and lower limits. And then, of course, I can create, macros, based on that, or timers based on that. And so I think the ease of commissioning is really where things come in. I don't think I've ever talked to an integrator that said they have, too much, or excuse me, not enough work and not enough people. Right. Right now they're back on their heels, overwhelmed. Knock wood, they've got lots of work, but they're understaffed. And so, helping them commission things effectively or service something effectively and efficiently is important, because it is a piece of the profit, right, recipe for any one particular dealer.
And yeah, and that is a great angle to hit on, where the software is easy. I went through the training. A lot of dealers, the software is super easy. The commissioning process is super easy. It works out great. And I think that's super important, because you hit the nail on the head, where everybody is hammered. Nobody can seem to find enough staff to take care of the workload that they have, which it's a great problem to have, to be busy, but to, have to retrain staff or whatever. Whereas you can take somebody who's familiar with the software already, and hey, they're off and running and ready to go. It's also worth noting too that you guys did just reopen up in-person training in it's not Provo, right? It's in Utah. What city in Utah is that in?
Yeah, so it's Orem, Utah.
Oh, that's right.
It's just north of the Provo area, and we've been based there for years. So it's probably 30 minutes south of Salt Lake.
Right. And there is, as I learned after the fact, unfortunately, there is an airport in Provo that
Yes.
If you're in California, there are certainly flights that get you into Provo, which is a much shorter trip than
Yeah.
Salt Lake City, but it's super convenient to get to, and training was great. I mean, it really, I've personally been through trainings for just about everybody out there, and the Vantage training was fantastic. Forrest, great instructor, and it's all hands on. It's all really everything that can be done to tee you up for success when you get back to your city and you start working on one of these things. It is just my feedback is it's a great training. It's great. It's in depth. You really get to see how things work well together, what the entire ecosystem is, and it's great. It's super worth going to. We'll put a link to in person trainings in the thing. What have you found where for new dealers who sign up, maybe they're familiar with an existing ecosystem, or existing control scheme or whatever? What do you find is the biggest challenge for a new dealer who's coming on board with Vantage?
I think it really just comes down to breaking them of the muscle memory they have, maybe with programming or quoting, and really just understanding that we would do things a little bit differently than maybe another vendor, as another vendor would do differently from us, right? And so it's not reinventing the wheel per se, but there's little nuances of how orders are placed through our software, maybe versus others, and so it's just kind of maybe breaking that habit. But I think the biggest thing is just understanding what their options are, and case in point, we had somebody designing a 36-volt system, brand new construction, and price really became an issue. And so we recommended, well, this is a pretty small system, 22 or so keypads, low voltage, and the wire runs are pretty manageable. Why aren't you quoting a 24-volt system? And you could value engineer ourselves, if you will, even using the Infusion platform. And it's not going to shave off thousands, but it is going to shave off enough for somebody to say, well, that's a big enough difference for me to go back to the client and say, okay, we value engineered this a little bit, and you're still getting Vantage Infusion. So those are some of the nuances. Understanding the different keypad styles, and then when you're deciding to use a third-party partner, is there any kind of an interface in between Vantage and that partner? Is another piece to understand. So, for example, if somebody is going to use Go Digital dimming, or usually what we find is a combination of face cut and digital dimming on projects, you need a gateway in between Vantage and that fixture manufacturer. We manufacture the gateway, and then of course we have to make sure that we interface with that fixture type digitally. And so I think it's just, again, making sure that they understand that A, these are when these things are used, and B, here's how you use them, and C, if you get yourself into trouble, that's what we have remote tech support for, and if we need to escalate it to on-site tech support, that's certainly a way to go as well.
Sure. And it is, I do want to touch on that. I think I'd be doing you guys a disservice if I didn't, but your tech support team is some of the best I've ever, some of the best I've ever encountered. And, it's rare that you need to use them, but a few dealers of mine who have said such positive things. Yeah, this guy walked me through here, had no problem, just laying it out and getting everything right, and super accessible. And I mean that goes a long way in this industry, especially with something as critical as lighting, for sure.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot too badly, but where do you think you've been around lighting for a long time, you've been involved in lighting for a long time, where do you think this is all going? So we're starting to see a lot more linear fixtures, we're starting to see a lot more low voltage kind of things. Where do you think it's headed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the direction we'll ultimately end up, is to be nearly 100% low voltage lighting. I mean, there are things you can do with low voltage lighting that you can't do with line voltage lighting, and some of the interesting fixtures that are being created as a result, like a completely pliable channel that an LED sits in. And more and more, as I go to trade shows, I'm starting to see fixture types that are really unique, very pliable. They don't have like a rigid channel or anything in them, but yet you could put them into drywall applications that might have, kind of a wave to it. And so more and more, we're seeing things that are, yes, it's linear lighting, but it's less linear in terms of, right, like angles and straight, right angles and straight lines. More and more, we're living in the world of Tron, right, in a sense. But yeah. So, but I think before we get to that, we're still going to see phase cut dimming. We're still going to see, some 0 to 10 dimming. We're still going to see dolly, and I think it's going to take a while for us to get to that complete low voltage solution. And I think while that's happening, it's interesting what's happening in the high voltage channel, right, with the electricians, because at the same time they've got opportunities now with solar and with storage that they didn't have as much before, right? That's only going to increase, and it really just depends on the market. I think obviously California has led the way with regs like Title 24 that helped us get to this point. But those are going to even increase even more as families own more electrical vehicles, and you're going to need to upgrade your service to your panel to accommodate charging those vehicles. I think you're going to find less about, hey, I've got 4 high voltage, line voltage, downlights in any one area, and more about storage, and all the other pieces of high voltage are going to move a little bit more towards the harvesting and storage of power.
Sure. And I think you're probably pretty much on target, but that is going to create a world where the custom integrator, the technology concierge guy, how we all try to position ourselves is going to be super important. Power management, lighting management, that kind of thing. It's all converging. So yeah, we'll be
exciting times. Yeah, exciting times.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for making time out. I know you are super busy, but thank you so much for carving this out for us and coming on and talking to us. And it's always great seeing you in person, and via the internet. So
you as well. I appreciate it, Chris. Thanks so much for the time and for having me, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon.
All right. Have a great week.